Picture this, it's 2010, and Japan Airlines, once this proud, soaring symbol of Japan's economic power, is in an absolute freefall. I mean, we're talking about a national icon, a titan of the airline industry, completely grounded. It was the largest corporate failure in the country's history outside of finance. Just how did it get so bad?
Well, the scale of the problem was just mind-blowing. The company was buried under a debt of 2.3 trillion yen. That's more than 22 billion US dollars. It was like a giant anchor dragging the entire airline down into the abyss.
And that leads us to the central question of this whole story, and it's almost too wild to believe. The Japanese government needed a miracle, but the person they called wasn't some hotshot airline executive or a famous restructuring guru. Nope, they turned to a 77-year-old man who had never, ever worked in aviation and who asked to be paid nothing for his time.
So let's meet this unlikely hero, right? The man who decided to walk straight into the fire when pretty much everyone else was running for the hills.
His name was Kazuo Inamori, the legendary founder of the tech giant Kyocera. But his resume for this particular job was, let's just say, unconventional. He was 77, well past the age most people retire. He took the job for a salary of zero. And, again, he knew literally nothing about running an airline. So you can imagine, the public and the media were pretty sure this was a recipe for an even bigger disaster.
Yeah, the overall feeling was brutal. Pundits, journalists, you name it, they were all saying things just like this. That he was way too old, totally out of his depth, and that Zhao was absolutely doomed to fail all over again. The pressure on him must have been immense.
But Inamori, he got in there and he realized something really quickly. The trillions in debt? That was just a symptom. The real disease was much, much deeper. The company wasn't just financially bankrupt, you could say it was spiritually bankrupt.
So Inamori's diagnosis was that the ship wasn't sinking just because of the debt, it was sinking because the crew was in total disarray. He found a culture that was just poisoned by distrust. Management and employees were practically enemies. Nobody had a shared goal, nobody was paying attention to costs, and, get this, managers were making huge decisions based on data that was months old. The whole company was just adrift with no one at the wheel.
And if you want to know how bad it was, listen to this. This was a common belief among Zhao's own leaders. They actually believed that since they were a public service, making a profit was a bad thing. They thought their goal was to not be profitable. It was a mindset that basically guaranteed failure.
Inamori understood right away that no spreadsheet, no cost-cutting plan, no financial wizardry could fix a broken soul. He couldn't just restructure the company's books, he had to restructure its entire way of thinking.
And to do that, he brought in the exact same philosophy that had guided his own incredible career. He called it the success formula. And he started this massive task of teaching it to everyone, beginning with the top 50 executives at JIL.
At its heart, it's this beautifully simple way to think about what actually drives results in your life and your work. And this wasn't just some memo he sent out. No, Inamori himself led these intense 17-hour-a-day training sessions, forcing these leaders to really look in the mirror and confront their own mindsets.
The formula itself is incredibly simple. The result you get is your way of thinking times your enthusiasm times your ability. Now, enthusiasm and ability, those are scored from 0 to 100, but way of thinking, that's different, and that's where the magic is. This little equation became the new operating system for all of JL. They even printed it on cards that every single employee had to carry with them.
Okay, check this out, because this is the real game changer. Your way of thinking is scored from -100 all the way to +100. And because it's a multiplier, it changes everything. Look, you could have incredible ability and tons of enthusiasm, say a 90 for both. But if your mindset, your way of thinking is negative, the entire result becomes massively negative. But with a positive mindset, it multiplies that same talent and passion into incredible success. This was the lesson he drilled into all 32,000 employees.
So, the big question, right? Did this philosophical cure actually work? Well, the results, they were nothing short of a miracle.
The speed of this turnaround is just hard to even comprehend. In February 2010, Inamori takes over a bankrupt company. Just 1 year later, 1 year, JAL posts the highest profit in its entire history. A year and a half after that, it's back on the stock exchange. It's astounding. And that record profit in the very first full year?
188.4 billion yen. The company went from losing mountains of cash to becoming a profit-making machine, almost overnight. The entire business world was just in complete shock.
Just let that sink in for a second. In about 28 months, a 77-year-old volunteer, using philosophy as his main tool, took Japan's biggest corporate disaster and turned it into one of the most profitable airlines on the planet. He didn't just save JAL, he gave it a new soul.
And that leaves us with a really powerful question to think about. The story of Japan Airlines seems to suggest that maybe, just maybe, the most valuable asset a company has isn't its money or its planes or its routes, but its way of thinking, its soul. What do you think?